Okay, so I just recap. So intersection of the root locus with the imaginary axis is the final rule, and what we do to find that is simply put 1 plus k GSHS equal to 0, and what follows from this equation is that S is equal to j omega will be the point where such a thing occurs. So we simply put S is equal to j omega in this equation. Now this equation will be a complex equation, so it has to be split into two parts, and we can then solve these two parts individually to get the required values of k and omega. But the problem with this is that when our polynomial itself is of a quite a high order, then we will land up with cases where either the imaginary or the real or both parts have roots that are not quadratic or even cubic or quartic. So there is no easy solution, and in that case what we do is we go back to Routh-Hurwitz criteria, and we use the fact that imaginary axis crossings or roots on the imaginary axis can be found out using the Routh-Hurwitz criteria. The first element of the array that we get, whenever that becomes equal to 0, then it will imply an imaginary um, root. Sorry, the when a yeah. So when a row becomes equal to 0, so we put um, so what we will be seeing in the Routh array in that case are um, these k's, some expression involving this k, and we will get the possible values of k which will lead to this situation, and from that value of k we can now get back to the characteristic equation and find the j omegas. So let me now look at a couple of examples. If we have so here if you put So we are going to get, as I said, there will be two parts, and we can split this and solve. But when we go for more complicated examples, then getting a solution is going to be pretty difficult. Like for instance, if you look at this is one example that I discussed earlier. So in this case, if you put so when you do this, as you can see that we are still left with an omega to the power 4, and at least one of the equations is going to give us something for which finding the roots will be difficult. So in this case, we will have to use the Routh criteria to figure out where the crossings occur. We have already seen how the Routh criteria can be used for finding out when we have roots on the imaginary axis. Now, some of the other things about this root locus business, let us consider point on the root locus. Suppose this is your root locus somewhere out here, and you are looking at a point out here. Okay, so this point will have two parts, real and imaginary, and if it is a branch which is not on the real axis or on the purely imaginary axis, then we can say that this has come from this has come from a part of the polynomial which is like this. This is the rest of the polynomial. Okay, so that means what is S? So when we have this kind of a form, it means that we are not actually getting a quadratic in the form S minus A whole square or S plus A whole square, where A is a real number. So that means we should be able to write this as all right. So if this is the form, then how much is this? And how much is this? For this point, so this will measure xi omega n, and this will measure so what can we conclude from here? If I look at this angle theta, so this is the geometry of this thing. And there is also another bit of geometry that is there. If let us say this is my imaginary axis, this is my real axis, I have some poles, zeros, poles out here, and this is my root locus. And this is a point on the root locus. Okay? So, what do these lines represent? This is my point S. This is, say, and let us say we have, okay, I'll put in two two complex conjugate poles as well. So what do these lines represent? If I have this point P here, if I call this as A, B, C, D, E, then so if I take the modulus or it's not even necessary to take this modulus to understand that this S minus Z1 this represents the directed line this represents the directed line PA PC P okay. So actually, if you are looking at the modulus of GSHS, at a particular point on the root locus, then this is just the length of these lines. Is it clear? And what is this? So you see, when you draw the root locus, this can provide you an idea of when you are looking at a particular branch of the root locus, it can not only provide you from that geometry an idea of this damping and natural frequencies, it also can tell you directly what is the gain. You can, if you have the root locus, you can simply look at a particular point, draw these lines joining the poles and zeros to that particular line, and then figure out, okay, what is the gain at this particular point from the geometry itself. This is important because when we are going to use the root locus for design purposes, these ideas of geometry will be very useful to you. Finally, if you consider finding the K, if you know the poles, or yeah, so if you have, say, a graph or a graph paper, your root locus is drawn something like this. So what happens is, when you, this is actually a practical thing, when you look at a point and you wish to find out that gain, so one way is actually geometrical, as I said. The other way would be to simply look at the coordinates of this point and you want to find out the corresponding K value, so you put in that particular value of S in your 1 plus K GSHS equal to 0. Now the problem that will happen is that when you pick up such a point by eye estimation, so you will obviously not get an accurate value of S, and when you put this in this equation, you will find that your K will become imaginary. So the convention is you just take the real part of K and proceed. So let me now give an example of a reasonably simple root locus and the application of these rules. We are dealing with GSHS and I'll give it to you in a factored form. So from this GSHS form, we can say that open loop poles and zeros are at so we keep on applying the rules. sorry, this will be minus. Oh, okay. This is okay. There will be minus 2 also. So we are going to have a pole here, sorry, a 0 here, and a pole here, here and here. So root locus exists to the left of an odd number of poles and zeros of the transfer function. So if I am here, then there is no question of odd number, it is 0. The moment I cross this, I have 1, 0, which is now to my right. So the root locus exists here, and the moment I move here, well, there are 2 and this goes on till infinity. So this is the part of the root locus that we can draw straight away. Now we find out the asymptotes.
So then what was the meaning of that line? Root locus starts at those 3 points and ends at -1.
Pardon?
So then what was the meaning of that line that root locus starts at those 3 points, I mean the poles, and ends at the 0?
Yeah, so we do know that this is going to start at the pole and this is coming out here. Okay, and there is something going to start from here, something going to start from here as well. This is something that is conforming to that rule. But now we know that something is going to start from here and should be going to infinity, because ultimately the number of poles and zeros will be the same, but those zeros are actually at infinity. So this will go towards infinity, but we don't know how this will go to infinity, or from here how things will go to infinity, or from here how things will go to infinity. Okay? So our question is whether it's going to be like this, or whether it's going to be like this, or this way, we don't know that. But we know something will begin from here, but this simple rule has already given us the beginning and end of one part of the root locus. what we can find is and if you look at the angles, so effectively this will be plus minus 90 degrees. So sorry. So you have the 0 out here. You have already drawn this as a part of our root locus, and in addition to this, we now have a point this is my centroid, and these are my asymptotes. So now I have a kind of an idea that if this is an asymptote like this, then we are probably going to see something which behaves this way. Okay, so let me use the green pen for one of them. So this is my next part, and now we go back to our equation. We started off with s plus 1 So if you take the derivative of this, let's see what this boils down to. This is what it should come down to. So this will be 1 into and this should simplify to and here again, well, it's a cubic, so you have to figure out the roots, and these roots will come out as equal to and another root. So that means now apart from these 2 points and the what I would call as a centroid, we also now have a break-in breakout point, and these two we can neglect, we don't consider, because we know that this must lie on the axis, real axis, and so we have a break-in and a breakout point, one point out here which is a break-in, either a break-in or a breakout point. And likewise, if you calculate the angle of departures, you will find this will be the ZIs. So we have only one 0, and that 0 is at -1. And for the poles, first we consider -2, and we have the other pole to consider, which will be so. Once you do these calculations, if you look at the picture here, actually you can make out more easily what the angles will be. Often that is the case. So these angles, as you can see, if you are considering this, they will be there will be a 45-degree line involved. We are considering this, so from here there will be a 45 degrees line involved. Then there will be another 90 degrees line involved, and there's a 90 degree to this also, there's a 90 degree to this other pole, whereas this is 45 degrees. So we will basically land up with 135 degrees. And you can check from the diagram also, because our 0 is here, and we are looking at the -1 plus j. So this is my pole of interest. So if you want to, you can also do it graphically. There will be this angle, then there will be this angle to contend with, and also this angle. So you are going to get 135 degrees. And what does this tell you? So far as the figure is concerned, now we already had the centroid out here. And the asymptotes were supposed to be at 90 degrees. So we already knew that the curve was going to be something like this. Now we can say that this angle is 135 degrees. And from principle of symmetry, we can also say that something similar will hold true for this as well. That this angle will be also 135 degrees. So you see, so far as this curve is concerned, whereas this part and this is a departure because it's starting from a pole, and we have something out here. So angle of arrival we will not have in this case. We can calculate and figure it out. And our locus will also not cross the imaginary axis. So you see, without much of an ado, we have been able to finish off a diagram which to start off with may have looked very complex.
Sir, how much longer before the class ends?
I'll just finish. So effectively we have finished drawing the root locus by just using these rules. So I'll conclude now. I'll be discussing more applications, but for the coming two lectures I will directly proceed to the theory of behind Nyquist plots, and then we will see how this and the Nyquist plots can be used for design of compensators and similar control tools. So far we have just focused on the drawing part. We'll next week onward we'll focus on the utilization of the drawing part. So that will be all for today. As a part of your assignments, you can try to actually write a small MATLAB code how to plot the basics of a root locus, not by using the rlocus command of MATLAB, but figuring out these existence. At least try drawing the, given a polynomial, try for starters drawing the root locus on the real axis and also drawing the asymptotes. So focus on that as your next assignment.
And sir, regarding the current assignment,
I think
sir, can we get?
she said that you can have one more day because of your BTP presentation, so I'll extend it by one day.
Thank you, sir.